Welcome to Talkin' Waukesha, the podcast where every conversation springs to life.
I'm Andrew Nofke.
And I'm Anthony Terrell.
And we're your hosts for today's journey into the heart of Waukesha.
Whether you're a local or just passing through, join us as we explore the stories, people, and hidden gems that make Waukesha truly special.
From community events to personal anecdotes, we're here to bring you the pulse of our vibrant town.
So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and let's dive into another episode of Talkin' Waukesha,
where every conversation springs to life. All right, welcome back to another episode of Talkin' Waukesha. Today our guest is Michael Poytinger. I said that right, I hope.
Yes,
he is the director of the Waukesha Civic Band. They are celebrating their 81st year. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us a little bit about what the Waukesha Civic Band is and how it got its starts?
Well, the Waukesha Civic Band is a collection of local musicians who perform a series of concerts in the park. The band is, as you mentioned, going into its 81st season. As far as I can determine, the band was started as an outgrowth of the Weber Brewing Company in Waukesha. Back in the day, many brewing companies sponsored their own bands. Blatt's Band in Milwaukee is another example. Mm-hmm. When the company closed, the city and the Musicians Recording Trust Fund took over financing the organization. The band itself is very similar to a number of bands in the area who started right at the end or near the end of a major World War. Mm-hmm. The Oconomowoc Band started almost 100, I think they're over 100 years now. They started after World War I. And the Waukesha Band started in 1944, which was when the war was coming to a close. Mm-hmm. The funding when we left the Weber Brewery, which was picked up by the city paid for half of the concerts, and the Musicians Recording Trust Fund, which is part of the Musicians Union, picked up the other half. Since that time, we've moved into having organizations within the city, individuals and companies that have taken up the sponsorship and help us to pay our musicians.
That's great.
Awesome. So then can you tell us a bit about your background and how long you've been the Civic Band director and how you got involved with all of that?
How far back would you want me to go?
As far back as you're willing to go.
Yeah.
I was born in Milwaukee at Deaconess Hospital. I've never lived more than 20 miles from the hospital in my entire life, nor has my wife. We're very local. I received my public school education through the Milwaukee Public Schools, got a great education there, went to university at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and later returned for a master's degree. I started teaching in Waukesha in 1971 at what was called Central Campus, which we now call Les Paul Middle School. That was a 2-year component of Waukesha High School. And when I started there were 2,200 students in a 5-building complex.
Wow.
There were about 37 students in the band program. It was a real challenge for first-year teachers.
That's a fantastically large band.
Well, we had it broken down into 3 sections, and it was a great challenge, but a wonderful opportunity. And I stayed on in Waukesha. I eventually opened up Waukesha North High School. I was there for 10 years. I also taught a little bit at Waukesha West at the end of my career, and in the interim there, I taught at, actually managed the school district's K-12 program. I did that for the last 20 years of my career. I worked out of the Lindholm building, and that was a wonderful opportunity. I've been with the band since 1974. When I started with the band, there was a rule that you had to live in Waukesha in order to play in the band. And my first 3 years, I was living in Milwaukee. When I moved out here, Jay Whitney, who was the band director at Waukesha South, kind of became my mentor, and he was also the director of the Waukesha Park Band. Jay, when I moved out here, the first thing Jay did is say, hey, we could use another clarinet player. Will you play in a band? I said, absolutely. And I never left. When Randy Hoff retired 6 years ago, I had been serving as the associate conductor, so it just made sense for me to move into the conducting responsibilities with the band.
Very nice.
Yeah. And I know too, I think our relationship has started too when I was in high school, and even I think after you were done teaching, the band director at the time went on a vacation for a couple of weeks, and then you came in and you taught for a hacker Andy Hacker.
Yes.
Yep.
Andy gave me a call and he said, could you take the band over for 2 weeks? And I said, well, for you, Andy, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I will tell you this, that first week that I was there, I went home and I was so exhausted because I had not been in a classroom for probably 10, 12, 13 years. I don't remember what it was. But I'd come home and flop down on the couch and my wife would wake me up later for supper.
Yeah.
Do you know how many kids you've roughly, or even adults, how many you've taught in your time?
You know, I've tried to figure that out, and I'm guessing over my 33 years of teaching, I've come in contact with at least over 2,000 band students.
That's great.
But that includes some things like when I was head of the music department, we would do an all-city 8th grade band festival, and I would direct that group, and we'd have like 230 or 40 kids in the band crammed onto the stage like sardines at Carroll College. So I'm sure it's upwards of that. And of course, working with adults over the years, worked with many adult musicians. I just recently stepped down from a position as conductor of the Grace Notes Symphonic Community Orchestra, which is stationed in Mugwanago. And I've been with them for 7 years now. And I've stepped down. It's time for someone else to have the opportunity to work with them. And I'm still going to be working with the park band. So now I won't be conducting year-round, just in the summers, which will be a little bit less stressful.
That'll be nice. You can travel a little, conduct a little.
Traveling is what we do.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fantastic life. So as we've mentioned a couple times now, the Civic Band is celebrating its 81st season. What does this milestone mean to you, and then what does it mean to the group as a whole?
I was thinking about how to answer this question. Of course, last year was our 80th anniversary, which was, a little bit of a special deal, and we had a nice proclamation by the mayor, and a number of people came and talked about the band. I think what it means to me, it is the continuation of a tradition of music in the parks, outdoor music by city bands. And this is not an unusual thing. There are a lot of bands around the area that do summer series of concerts. It's a wonderful opportunity for people to come together, enjoy an hour worth of music in the park. And what I enjoy seeing, especially after, is the amount of people who reconnect in the audience with people they haven't seen, and they bump into each other at a concert, and they reestablish a friendship. And of course, I think the band really enjoys playing for our audience. We've been doing this for a long time, and if you went through the band, although I'm probably one of the older members, there are people who've been in the band for decades, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So the instrumentation and the people that I've worked with and are working with are people that I've known for a long time, and some very quality musicians, band directors, and some professional musicians we've had in the group, and amateur musicians who are very, very talented. So it's an interesting experience. I think you might get to that about what a rehearsal is like, and I'll let you know. It gets pretty intense, but it's very enjoyable.
So kind of talking about all that as well too, like how has the band evolved over the years, over at least in the time that you've seen?
Well, it's one of the things that I like about the band is its stability and consistency. You've been down, Anthony, I know you've been in the band shell playing. You played in the band with us. And, you know the size of the band shell. It's not a place where you can put a 100-piece symphonic band.
No.
We have a very standard instrumentation of 39 paid musicians in the band. We also add to that 10, 11, or 12 high school students who have exhibited great talent, and under recommendation of their teachers and coordinated with me and our band manager, Glenn Lundy, sit in with the musicians, which is one of our programs that we've had, virtually as long as I've been there, so it's over 50 years. The band is essentially really what you'd call a wind ensemble. It's not a full-size concert band, but all the instruments are represented, from flute to tuba, percussion, bass, clarinet, oboe, bassoon. They're all there. And because of the continuity, the band is able to do things that I think maybe some other community bands can't do because of A, quality musicians, and B, the fact that they've been there so long. And many of them are band directors themselves, so their knowledge of the literature is really good, which makes my job and their job of performing much easier.
And by literature, you mean the actual pieces themselves?
Yeah, the piece of music. And that can be anything from, the Stars and Stripes, which we play at every concert, and also traditional overtures. We do a lot of show tunes, marches. My goodness, we play marches till they're coming out of our ears. But it's funny, the people in the audience really like those things. Sousa's very big, but there's a lot of other people that we play, and people like that. So that, I think, is one of the things that we haven't changed so much as we've been consistent. And people know what they're going to get. They get a high-quality performance. They get 1 hour worth of music. We very rarely run over by more than a minute or two. We always start promptly at 8. And so although we've maybe changed the uniforms over the year, back in the day, they actually had uniforms with hats and plumes and everything.
Oh, wow.
But now we tend to go with dark on the bottom and light on the top with a bow tie if it's not too hot out. If it gets pretty hot, we get rid of the bow ties. We don't want anybody passing out on the stage.
That's no fun.
No fun.
So what goes into planning the season of performances for the Civic Band?
Well, for me, I'm already planning next year's performances in terms of in what we call my daughter's bedroom, and I call it the Park Band Music Annex. I probably have about 300 pieces of music in that room now, spread all over the shelves and floors and dressers. And in the mirror in the annex, as I call it, I have all kinds of Post-its with ideas for concerts. Some of them pan out. Some of them you look at them 6 months later and say, oh, my God, what was I thinking? But you start thinking about a theme, and we've been doing theme concerts since I've come in. It seems that the audience likes that. And, of course, with Mark Helgert, our announcer, who is brilliant at his job, he already has a couple of the concert scores that he looks through. I send him some liner notes with fine stuff. He kind of is the person who leads the audience through the journey of the concert, so to speak. So I started this year's concerts last year, and we have 5 of them, and they I don't know if you remember them, but if you want me to go through them.
Yeah, that'll be the next question. So
okay.
We'll tease them shortly.
So what happens is I will come up with an idea. I'll start picking out pieces from the band literature that I know that fit that scenario of music. But then I go to that wonderful device called YouTube, and I start listening. I also solicit suggestions from people in the band, especially the guys who are currently in the field. They know the level of music we can play. Sometimes we play a little easier. Sometimes we play a little bit hard. Sometimes the band says I pick too hard. But I'll kind of come up with a pile, usually 15 to 20 pieces that fit the genre of what I'm trying to communicate. And then I'm constantly shifting that pile in and out. What's a good opener? After we do our fanfare and the national anthem, what's a thing that will get the people involved, not necessarily blast them out of their chairs, but engage them in their interest. And then I try and have the music flow, not necessarily with a particular storyline, but adhering to the concept of what the concert is.
Right.
It takes time. Right now, my dining room table has about 50 pieces of music on it. But the concerts are pretty well up here in my mind. 3 of them are already completely fleshed out and done. And then I have 2 others where I have some music coming in, and we'll finish those up in this month, and we'll be ready to go in June.
Yeah. So when you're selecting this music, how do you choose from, woodwind specific ones to the kind of those symphonic ones where you would typically need like your strings and your more fleshed out orchestral music? How do you pare that down and get that ready for a more ensemble style?
Well, the band itself is a band, and bands do not normally have string instruments in them, with the following exceptions. Occasionally you'll find a band that will have a string bass, which will double the tuba line. A few bands, like one that comes to mind with the United States Air Force Band, does all customized arrangements, and they have 4 cellos in their band, which is very unusual. But if you've ever heard that band, it is a very unique sound. It still sounds like a band, but there's a little bit of a softness that can sometimes take down the energy that a band has. So as a band, we probably have, the woodwind section would be flute, oboe, bassoon, bass clarinet, clarinets, saxophone quartet. And the brass section would be trumpets, French horns, trombones, euphonium, and tuba. So when I'm looking for music, I try and say within the theme, and sometimes we divert. Mark will say, well, we're going to take a step back from our theme tonight, which is, and we just like to play this piece of music that Director Poytinger likes, and you're going to love it, and we'll step back. But I'm kind of looking for a flow in that nobody would like to come and hear the band play 12 marches. Okay? Everybody likes marches, or at least they tolerate them.
Yeah, you can only take a certain amount.
It's like anything else. And, when you go to even a pop concert of a great artist, after 2 hours, you've really had enough. It's time to move on. So I try and program not only different styles of music, but like an emotional style. Try and find something on every concert that's a little bit softer, slower, more like a ballad or even a lullaby, because it kind of cleanses the ears of the audience. And if you're always playing tunes that are very aggressive and strong and fast, after a while that wears thin. So I try and program in a way that will not only pull the audience towards the band, but sometimes hand them a pillow and let them relax and sit back. So that's kind of what many directors do. And, of course, programming for interest. We played some very unusual pieces with the Park Band, and we've done some very interesting soloists. We had a bagpipe soloist one year. We had an accordion soloist, a person who played zither, and traditional soloists like a cornet, clarinet, flute. But we try and mix it up so that there's an interest, and so that when we get to the Stars and Stripes, which is always our last number, people are happy they've been there. They've enjoyed what they've heard, and hopefully they're looking forward to coming back. An hour's not so long, and boy, I'll tell you, there's nothing like being there on a 75-degree night with low humidity, watching the sunset behind the Les Paul Performing Arts Center. It's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah, it's just a gorgeous experience.
Yeah. I think you also do a really well job of organizing the music too. So even the musicians that are playing, we don't get tired either. It's spaced out just perfectly. Where we're, again, like you said, we're not going fast and loud. All of a sudden, by the time we get to the end of the concert and start the Stripes, we're all dead from playing.
There are a few concerts where people have looked at me a little cross-eyed when they're going out there to play the stand-up part of the piece, but that's part of the job. Everybody recognizes it.
Yes, of course.
You can't have a piccolo player playing very quickly and going to Stars and Stripes and then having a solo to kind of not tip over during.
Yeah, blue in the face. All right, so as we kind of teased, the performances for the Civic Band this year are Hooray for Hollywood, An American Salute, a spooktacular concert, Down to the Seas, and Pop Goes the Band. So what was kind of the thought process for all of those?
Well, it was things that I had up on the mirror. And, you think about them and you go, what would be a good flow of interest so that not every concert is the same. And, that can happen if you're not careful. You start with the opening pieces and you play a march, then you play an overture, then you play maybe a feature, and then you always end with a show tune. And after a while, there's a sameness that doesn't affect the quality of the music, but it seems like it's the same thing. So I don't know, like the Spooktacular was just a name that came to me. I was thinking, what would we name for a concert? Well, we always talk about spectacular music. Well, how about a spooktacular concert that would have a little bit of a lean towards the dark side, so to speak? The Hooray for Hollywood, I was thinking of the fact that, when you think of where a lot of really good music is being written, it comes out of the film industry. When you say someone like John Williams, everybody knows John Williams. He's an amazingly adept composer, and he has done music. I was kind of talking with Mark Helgert, and we were talking about John Williams, and I said to him, do you know that he wrote the film score to Gidget Goes to Rome? And he just looked at me. I said, yeah, I went and looked it up, and I went and saw his earliest pieces, and they were all these movies that you would say, oh, John Williams, he's Star Wars, E.T., and all those things. I said, no, he wrote for some really amazing grade B movies.
Sure.
But I thought, that would be a nice way to start the season. And we're looking at music that's going to be, I think we're opening with The Parade of the Charioteers, which is from Ben-Hur, which was one of those movies that I think is tied with, it might be, what was the one with the tall aliens that they had? Pandora was...
Avatar.
Avatar. I think they won like 11 Academy Awards. And we're also doing a piece that I was going to tell you about if you asked me what we were doing. It's called How the West Was Won. And that was a soundtrack piece from the movie of the same title. And that's interesting in that I have been looking for that piece for decades. I remember playing it in high school band. And every time I called someone, hey, do you have How the West Was Won? Well, yeah, we do. Well, it was How the West Was Won from the TV version, not the film version. And that was an interesting piece because that was written for one of the first CinemaScope films. And if you remember the CinemaScope, that was filmed with 3 cameras. So when you went to the theater, it wasn't just the big screen in front of you. They had screens on the side, and it really was, 120 or 130 degrees of visual. So it's a spectacular movie. And the music is really good. And I finally found it, and I thought, I got to fit this in. In fact, I actually found it after I was working on the second concert, which was the one, our patriotic concert. And I pulled something else, and I slipped that one in there. And then I found out it didn't have a first French horn. Mark Helgert, who's a genius with composition and everything else, was able to extract a part out of the score for the French horn, so we can do that this year.
Very cool.
Then what is the third concert we're doing?
Spooktacular. The Spooktacular concert.
Oh, I skipped one. The
American Salute.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah, sorry,
American
yes.
Salute. The piece that I think the audience will enjoy, and we haven't done it in a number of years. It's called An American Salute by, the name escapes me right now. But if I tell you the name American Salute, you'd look at me and you go, I don't know that piece. And the minute you heard the first 4 bars, you'd go, I know that piece. It's based on the tune When Johnny Comes Marching Home. It's kind of flashy and brilliant, has a bassoon duet that you don't hear real often. It's a kind of rapid-fire duet. And that's our second concert. The third concert's the Spooktacular. Then the fourth concert is the Down to the Sea, or I kind of think of it Down to the Sea in Ships. And that came to me going through the Park Band Library. I ran into a piece that we hadn't played in years called The Parade of the Tall Ships. And that was written and premiered back in 1976 when we celebrated our bicentennial.
Yeah.
And it was in recognition and to commemorate the gathering of the tall ships in New York Harbor. I don't think you guys are old enough to remember that.
Not quite, no.
But I remember watching it in a hotel room up in Marquette, Michigan with my wife. We were up there actually judging a drum and bugle corps show. And for all day, they had this televised on TV showing the Parade of the Tall Ships. And they say it's the largest gathering of sailing ships in the 20th century.
Wow.
You'd have to go back to the Napoleonic era when they had huge navies in France. And,
You need multiple armadas, I imagine, coming together.
But I think they had 10, 11, 12, 13 ships, all large 3, 4, 5-masted ships. And it's a nice piece. It's kind of dramatic, has a very nice center section that is a little bit like a march trio. And I thought, that'd be nice to do that piece. So that was one that I kind of encouraged me to do that. And then the last one, actually, I call it Pop Goes the Park Band. I like the alliteration of the P's in there. And the idea was to maybe look at pop music over a span of decades. So I've been looking at, and still have got a few openings for what I'm going to put in, but I've been looking at everything from a piece called Alla Barocco, which is a piece back from the 60s, a concert band piece that's a fusion of folk and rock. And then I've been looking at some music of Simon and Garfunkel. I've got some music of Chicago. I was looking at a little bit of Carole King. And then I found a Taylor Swift arrangement. I said, how can we do pop music and not do Taylor
Right.
Swift? Unfortunately, she's unavailable to solo with the band.
So
But
close.
I'm sure she'll send us her best regards.
Yeah.
And then one that I think is going to be real interesting, I mentioned just a couple people in the band, and they've kind of looked at me out of the side of their face. We're going to do a Led Zeppelin on tour.
That sounds
So
fantastic.
we're doing, I think they have the Immigrant Song, and I think I'd written this down somewhere, that Immigrant Song, and what was the other one that's really, oh, I've got it right here. Immigrant Song, Stairway to Heaven, Black Dog, and there's a couple others in there.
Ooh.
And it's kind of a nice arrangement, and I think people will be surprised at how it translates to a concert band. We're real fortunate that we have a lot of people in the band who also play in Waukesha Jazz Express and in the woodwinds and brasses, percussion. So they're real familiar with, the genre. So I'm hoping that people will really like it.
So is it sort of a medley that brings them all together, or is it
medley
different?
that brings them all together?
That sounds amazing.
So we're not taking any breaks in between, and we're not going to encourage any body surfing in the audience, nor will I tolerate any body surfing in the band. But I think that'll be an interesting concert.
Yeah, very
And
much so.
As always, I'm looking forward to it. It's a lot of work, but when you're all done and you finally get up on the stage, it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's important too for people to know, like the type of music we're doing too, because I think the stigma is that, it's a symphony band, it's going to be older classical music, and that's all it's going to be. But no, like you said, we're doing Taylor Swift, Led Zeppelin. You're looking at Chicago. Like there's so many years worth of music that we cover that it's not just old style music. There's something for everyone.
And the funny thing is, if you go back far enough, Sousa marches would have been considered pop music because it's a two-step. You can dance to them.
Yeah.
We did a concert, and I don't know if you were there or playing, but we did a concert called Shall We Dance? And we had some very traditional band music. We did 3 movements from Suite of Old American Dancers, which would be considered serious band work. But we also did a tango and some other things, kind of giving people an overview of dance in general. So that's kind of part of our mission, not only to entertain people, but to educate them. And of course, Mark Helgert, our announcer, is a big component in that because he has a wealth of information, a background on these pieces. And we also find that people will come up and say, hey, I'm glad you told me about that piece because I didn't know that. I'll tell you another thing that we found real interested in over the years. When I was associate conductor, I do 1 or 2 concerts a year. I would pick some very traditional band pieces. Some of them were a little bit weird, on the weird side. But we always found that if we explained to our audience what they were going to hear and told them how the pieces fit together, people would come up afterwards and say, I'm glad you played that. That was different. I didn't know that kind of music existed for you. And we still do traditional overtures and pieces like that. I'm really toying with trying to do Tchaikovsky's March Slav, which is a very traditional band orchestra overture, transcribed for band, quite difficult. The problem is finding enough time to work it up because our rehearsal time is so limited. But we do pieces for our show that we did, I think it was last year or the year before, for our patriotic show. We did a rather serious piece called Elegy for a Young American, which was written to commemorate the assassination of John Kennedy. Very serious and straight-up piece on a patriotic concert, and it was very well received by the audience. So I think you're right, Anthony. We try and mix it up enough so that everybody can eventually find something that makes them happy.
Right. Yeah.
And you can't please everybody with every piece.
Oh, right. But I mean, just talking about this lineup, it's a very eclectic mix. I mean, you're bound to hear something you haven't heard before. You're bound to, find something new and learn something new, it seems.
Well, and again, as I said, I can't express enough my appreciation for the musicians I work with because they're very quick. Anthony, you know how short our time is preparing things, and they go really well. I always tell the band, I said, I'm not worried about the occasional mistakes. What really amazes me is how much we accomplish in such a short time, and that's because they're good players. Good musicians.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times now. So do you want to, we kind of skip towards our question. So can you explain what the rehearsals look like for the Civic Band? I always found it fascinating. And anytime I tell people about it, they're always so surprised.
Well, not only are they surprised, but a lot of my peers who direct summer bands are also surprised, because most summer bands will have a day or an evening rehearsal for 2 hours, and then they'll meet later in the week to put the concert on. We are, I think, somewhat unique in that we have a rehearsal and a concert on the same night. So this is what happens. I show up at Les Paul with my badge to get into the building at 5:30. I go upstairs. We always have someone there early to man the door to make sure that only people who are supposed to get in the building get in the building. I go upstairs and turn on the lights, and Glenn Lumley, the band manager, usually gets there shortly after I do. We just make sure that the chairs haven't been too messed up when the band left the week before. And in recent years, band members have been coming in earlier and earlier, I think, to address music concerns. We start rehearsing at 6:30. And what I do between 5:30 and 6:30 is we put all the folders out. Our musicians don't see the music until the night of the concert, which, Anthony, you know how that is. I also,
almost sight reading it, basically, if they haven't seen it before.
We're sight reading the rehearsal, and the second time when we play the concert, it's the second shot. We do rehearse. We'll stop if something is not right, or if we miss a transition or a tempo change, or there's a big crash and burn on a key signature change. But what I do in the hour before the rehearsal starts now, I've gotten in the habit of walking around as musicians come in, and I will pull someone aside or walk up to them and say, hey, here's a heads up. In the piece we're doing, you've got a saxophone solo at measure 28.
Nothing brings my anxiety higher than when I see you walking towards me and I'm like, oh no, I haven't looked at the music yet. There's something that I'm going to need to know.
But I have found, and people, we didn't always do this, but it just seemed to be a good idea. Giving people a heads up when they're there a half hour before the rehearsal, they really appreciate it. Because then you get a chance to look at the solo. Everybody's warming up. Nobody can really hear everything that's happening. You can hear yourself. And so, or I'll grab one of the people like Bill Zeidler, our principal clarinet, and I'll say, Bill, here's a really kind of a dicey part at this part in the piece. Can you make sure that everybody in the clarinet section as they come in gets a heads up, and Bill takes care of it? I always talk to the first trumpet player, whether it's Craig Hurst or someone else, because they get a lot of solos usually in the pieces we're doing. Or if there's like in the piece, How the West Is Won, there's a big horn feature in there. I'll catch those people as they come in and say, you're probably going to want to look at this before we rehearse it. I've found that when we start the rehearsal and we get to those spots, they're really pretty good because we had a chance to look at them. And as I said, people come in early. Usually by 6:15, just about everybody's there, and it's a real cacophonous sound. A lot of people are looking at the music. But at 6:30, promptly at 6:30, I step up on the podium. Our principal clarinetist gives a tuning note, and we're off and running. We usually run the pieces down in order. They have a repertoire sheet. All the music is placed in their folders in order. That's done by myself and Cynthia Eisenman, who's our band librarian. And then we just charge into the music. On some pieces where I know the band is familiar, let's say we're going to play Semper Fidelis, which is a Sousa march. In fact, I think we're playing it for this year's patriotic concert. Everybody knows that. It's a homage to the Marine Corps. We might not take any of the first endings. So we'll shorten the piece. Instead of being 3 minutes and 20 seconds long, it'll be a minute and a half, a minute and 40 seconds. And the band, if there's something different on any of the repeats, I'll say the second time through I want this, the first time through I want that. People take their pencils, they pencil it in, and away we go. If there's a piece that's particularly challenging, I'll try and set up the rehearsal so I have, if it's a 6-minute piece, I'll try to allow myself to have 9 minutes to work it. But that's how we do it. And it's I always say it's a rehearsal without a net. And the concert has no net at all. If you fall, you fall. But again, because of the quality musicians, we get that done. At 7:30, usually, although occasionally I run them over by a few minutes. 7:30, 7:35, we're all packing up. Everybody's leaving. They're going across the street to the band shell. I go in one of the practice rooms and take off my sweaty shirt from rehearsal and put on a new shirt. And we go over and meet. They have that 25 to 30 minutes to rest, and then at 8 o'clock the stick comes down and we play.
Yeah, it sounds intense, but at the same time, it sounds riveting at the same time.
I've had a few of my colleagues who direct summer bands tell me that we're crazy, but I said, well, it all works out. And it comes down to the quality of the musician, and we have really good people.
Yeah. And my perspective, too, from being one of the musicians in the band, there is a lot of times where there are songs that even I've played, and I was like, okay, I'm familiar with this. Cool, great. I don't have to worry too much about it. The one once over is a nice refresher. Cool. But there's also just an adrenaline that I'm sure others get too for playing these only for a little bit and then going and having to perform it, that I think makes the experience just so much more fun too.
Well, Anthony, you've had the experience of being a high school band musician. Were you in a band at Carroll?
Yes.
So you've had that experience of what rehearsals are from time to time, and then when you get to the concert, people always say, well, we did better tonight, or boy, we were really on. It's all a matter of mental preparation. And you always find that when the chips are down, when the rubber hits the road, people really bear down. And that's, you're exactly right. It's amazing that that moment performing for a live audience really brings up the level of people. And as I said, with the people that we have who have been at it a long time, they kind of rise to the occasion. And, it is fun to play in the group.
Yes.
It's not just the people are enjoying themselves. The people in the band have that moment of rush, Every time somewhere in a concert, there's something that goes even better than you want it to go. And you can kind of see the aha look on people's faces. Very gratifying as a conductor when people know that, hey, we've gone a little bit beyond our normal expectation. So it's intense, but everybody likes it. It's on one night. It's all done, and it's good. And then we can all go out to Tally's and have something to eat because everybody's starving by the time we're done.
Yeah. Is it hard to perform on a full stomach?
I never perform on a full stomach.
I'll do a half a stomach because if I'm on empty, I feel so sick, and then you're putting all this energy into it. So I at least try to have something light beforehand.
So half sandwich, granola bar,
Generally for me, on the day of a concert, I don't have anything to eat after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I do better on an empty stomach. You don't have to worry about getting to a bathroom, although there's one pretty close. Never had to do that yet.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go out afterwards, and that's part of the camaraderie of being in a group. We talk about it. People say, hey, this went good. Someone said, I wish I had a chance to do that again. And I say, you probably will. But that's kind of how that works.
Yeah.
That sounds great. So out of all the pieces that you've played, put into the works for this year, do you have a favorite piece of music that you're performing this season?
Not really. I try to perform things with a view to the audience, a view to the musicians who have to play it, and then a view to satisfying myself because I have to stand up there and listen to it when they play it. I don't have a particular favorite this year. I alluded to some that are kind of features.
Right.
But I kind of enjoy the moment of recreating the music with the band. And the thing I always find interesting is that when you work with an organization where you have 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks of preparation for a concert, there's a lot of time to go over things. What I find gratifying and what satisfies me the most is, as I said, when things go better than expected. And we have high expectations. I mean, we're professionals. I expect people to do a good job. But it is being on a tightrope without a net beneath you. Everybody has to be on their toes. And I would be lying if I said there weren't a couple of times where we're really on our toes because things have gone two different directions. But everybody always pulls things together. I like the How the West Were Won, the ones how we're doing that one. I like the American Salute that we're doing. The movie For a Darkened Theater is really interesting because it's all Danny Elfman music.
Okay.
And it's got Beetlejuice, and I think it's got The Nightmare Before Christmas and the ballad from Edward Scissorhands.
Okay.
You might remember that.
All those Tim Burton movies.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested in to see how the Led Zeppelin piece goes. But My appreciation comes not only from the music we're playing, but how the band puts the music and brings life to it. That's what really brings me a certain sense of gratification and satisfaction.
So you've been working so long on authoring this musical story and just seeing how the band comes together to present it to the community.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have my back to the audience, so I can't always see, but there are a number of wives in the band. They always sit in the same spot. I turn around, I can all see my wife and Mark Helgert's wife and Ned Nagy's wife and a couple other people, and I can tell by the look on their face how we've done. If my wife is smiling, I know it's okay.
So what would you say to someone who's never been to a Civic Band concert to encourage them to check it out?
You know, what I would say to them is any Civic Band concert, especially in the summer, is part of our American musical heritage. There are concerts in the parks in the European countries. Their bands sometimes are different than our bands. Brass bands in the British Isles are huge. They have probably as many of those or more than the traditional concert band that we have. But in our country, I think one of the first organizations that brought music to the masses was the band. Most communities had them, especially if you think after the Civil War. There were bands in the Civil War. We have one in the area, a First Brigade band. They play on original Civil War instruments.
Oh, wow.
And they do concerts around. It's very interesting because in that case, the conductor faces the audience, and the band members are facing the conductor. They have their backs to the audience because all of their instruments are over the shoulder. Very interesting. Yeah. So the concerts in the park, the local city band has been there oftentimes far earlier than the local city symphony orchestra. And so it's part of our heritage. It's something that people do. And it's fun. You know, one of the things that I always enjoy, and especially in earlier years, we used to have a playground right next to the band shell. And many of the people in the band would come and people in the audience would come and their kids would play on the playground. And it was amazing because when the band hit the first bars of the Stars and Stripes Forever, all these kids would come running back into the audience to be with their parents because they knew the band concert was over.
That's very cool.
And so I think the other thing is there's something about, we all like live music. People love to go to Summerfest and the State Fair, and we have our tribute concerts here. There's something about being with community, listening to music out of doors that's different than, and maybe even a little bit less formal, but good music just the same. I think it's interesting. I've run into people over my 50 plus years with the band that'll come up to me as I'm standing and packing up, and they'll wave to me and they'll say, "Hey, you don't remember me, do you?" It's usually a student or a student's parent. I'll say to them, "Now, you got to give me a second because there's a lot of files to dig through in my head." Oftentimes, I will find that I remember their musical instrument first, and then the name comes back. And people that have been in the band who have retired, they're now way older than I am, up in their 80s and some even their 90s, they'll come back and say hi. And people tell me that, "Hey, I ran into so-and-so. I haven't seen since I was in high school." So it's kind of that melting pot where people get to move around. And it's very rare that at the end of the concert, everybody, heads for the exits because there are no exits. And it's very common that a percentage of the audience stands around in front of the band shell talking to people. They wait for their husbands and wives to finish up packing up in the band. And people want to come up and say hi to people in the band or to me. And again, it's a form of community. And if I might just say, I think in today's world, we sometimes miss that. When I go places and I'm more concerned about not being run over with someone looking at their cell phone than I am from someone not paying attention to where they're walking, talking to a friend. So I think these opportunities to bring people together, to see their friends making music, and some of them who have made music with the group or make music with other groups, is kind of part of what we do in our country. And I think it's great. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing. There's so many people where they go through high school playing in their bands and, they kind of just let that talent fade a little bit. they don't have the opportunity. So, the Civic Band seems like a great opportunity for people who really enjoyed their high school band experience, or even just, casual learning their instruments. So,
well, if I can digress for just a minute, I'll give you a really good example of that. Dr. Craig Hurst has been directing the band at UWM at Waukesha, which used to be UW Waukesha, for many years. And as you know, the facility is closing. The enrollment has really gone down a bit, and it's going to be that whole area is going to be redeveloped. But Craig has done that band for over 30 years, and it was funny because I played in there almost since I retired, about 15 more years. And I was sitting in the band one day warming up before rehearsal, and a woman sat down next to me, and I recognized her immediately, and she didn't say anything to me. I was playing, and I leaned over and I said, "So, how have you been, Sue?" And she said, "I've been really good, Mr. Poytinger. How have you been?" This is a student from Waukesha North High School from the late 1970s who joined the band playing clarinet. And so we talked a little bit, and she sat right next to me. She said, "I never thought I'd be playing in a band with my high school band director," and talked about what have you been doing in your family and all those things. And the next semester, another girl showed up in the saxophone section. I walked over and said, "How you doing, Julie?" She said, "Oh, Mr. P, I heard you were playing in the band. I decided to join." So that's one of those examples when you talk about playing your musical instrument. I would say to anybody who's out there, if you've still got that horn sitting at home in a closet, pick it up and honk on it a little bit and toot on it a little bit and get out one of your old books, because there are all kinds of bands in this area who would love to have you come out and play. And many of them are not concerned whether you've been playing a lot. They'll give you a chance to play. They'll give you a chance to build your chops. And that's happened to a lot of people I've run into. And it's never too late to pick up the horn. Kids have told me, I didn't think I could play anymore, but, after a few practice sessions at home, it came back. And it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun.
Do you have a favorite memory from your time directing the band, or directing any bands even?
I have one that's a real pip. When I used to be the associate conductor and I conducted only a few concerts, it was kind of an inside joke with the band. When I stepped up on a podium, people would say, "Oh, God, I forgot my rain gear," because I had a lot of concerts I conducted. That was the only concert we got rained on. And so we had a year where we were conducting, and the weather report was somewhat ominous, but our tradition is we do everything we can to get the concert in because we don't have any makeup dates.
Right.
So we went out, and it was pretty dark, but we started the concert and got about 15 minutes into it, maybe a little bit further, and it was starting to rain. And I looked back towards Glenn Lundy, our band manager, and he sits right off to my right side of vision, and he's looking at me, and he's mouthing "Victory at Sea," "Victory at Sea," which was the last piece we were going to play. So we were pulling what they call an audible. So as Mark is just stepping up to the podium, I flash him "Victory at Sea," and then I hold it up and I move it around so that the band can see we're not playing the next piece on the repertoire. We're going to "Victory at Sea." Okay, so it's a traditional piece. We've played it many times over the years. It's well received by the audience, written for the TV program in the 1950s called "Victory at Sea" by Robert Russell Bennett. Really nice piece of music. And we're playing it, and as we're playing, and the edge of the band is right at the edge of the proscenium. And I'm standing out a little bit from the proscenium, and I can feel the back of my head getting wet and my collar's getting wet. But we're going along, right? We finish up, and I turn around to look at the audience, and there are 3 people left. There are 3 people sitting in the front row under a huge golf umbrella, and if you ever want to know what the sounds like to have 3 people clapping when one person's holding an umbrella. And I went over to the microphone, I said, "God bless you people for sticking it out to the end," because it was really, people had left, or they went in the library, or they went to their cars. But to see those 3 people hanging in, I thought, now that's the real Waukesha spirit. Can do. It was an interesting time. We also had one time in the band, I wasn't conducting. I'm not going to name any names, but we were playing a piece that was written in cut time, but we were practicing it in 4/4 time. And we got to the concert and we gave the downbeat, and half the band started in 4/4 and half the band started in cut time.
Oh, no.
Which meant that half the band was playing 2 measures for every 1 measure the other half the band was playing. Well, everybody realized quickly that, no, this is not right. What are we going to do? And somehow the back of the band, the percussion section, picked up on the vamp, the line underneath, and they started playing it over and over and over, and other people dropped out. And the director looked at the band and mouthed, number 32, and he came in at 32, and we finished off the piece. I don't know if the audience knew that we'd had that near crash and burn, but everybody in the band knew we had it. We were all saying, you got to remember, is it in cut time or is it in 4/4 time? Yeah. Those things happen once in a while, but...
Yeah.
They always say as long as you end together, you fool like 90% of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good start is really important, because if you don't start together, people hear a segmented introduction. And whether it's loud or soft or in between, if you give the release together, people really like that. Mm-hmm. Stuff that happens in between should be good, but you can get away with a few things from time to time.
Just sounds like jazz every now and then.
Yeah. Are there any instruments or sections in the band that you think deserve more appreciation?
No.
I knew that was going to be the answer as soon as I saw that question there.
First of all, I'm not crazy. I go out to eat with these people after the concert. Everybody deserves their moment of due. And, we try and recognize our soloists. But the band has so many talented people in it. It's hard for me to say, well, this trumpet section or this clarinet section or this horn section deserves more recognition. If we're doing a piece and a section has a really good moment, we'll try and say, French horn stand, saxophone stand, please, clarinets, whatever. Mm-hmm. But it takes all of those people to make those pieces work. And when they're all as good as those people are, I don't have a favorite. Sure. I will tell you this, when I was a kid, my favorite instrument was whatever solo instrument I heard before I picked an instrument. If I heard a piece that had a good trumpet player, I wish I was a trumpet player. I wish I was a French horn player. I wish I was a violin player. Eventually, we all make a choice. We pick a instrument to play. So I really don't have a favorite, and they're all necessary, and they're all good musicians. So, and you knew my answer before you.
I read that one. We're not going to get an answer out of this one. So I guess off that then is, are there any instrument sections do you think that more people should be willing to try, adults and students like that seems more daunting than it actually is?
Every musical instrument has its own difficulties. Mm-hmm. And, someone will say, well, the bassoon is a difficult instrument because we always describe it as an instrument for people who are all thumbs, because there's about 9 or 11 keys on the back of the bassoon that are played only with your thumbs. Mm-hmm. On a standard saxophone, Anthony will tell you he's only got one key that he has to play on the back, which is your octave key. Mm-hmm. So he wouldn't pick that instrument because he's not all thumbs. Oboes are difficult because of the reed. Clarinet has a very wide range. Flute, whatever. Trumpet, the brass instruments you're dealing with. Embouchure. People sometimes think, well, it's easy to play a percussion instrument because all you're doing is hitting something with a stick or a mallet. But percussion is an extremely important component in the band. Mm-hmm. And actually, that's one of the first places I look to in the band for accuracy with the ensemble. I always tell bass drummer, no matter what you hear in a band, you are with me. You are with my stick. You and I control what's happening in the band. If it's not the bass drummer, it's probably going to be the timpani player. Mm-hmm. But all the instruments have their own challenges. I think the important thing for a person who wants to play, even adults, and I've known adults who have picked up instruments in age 30, 40, and 50 or older, pick an instrument you like, and you will overcome the challenges of the instrument. Don't say, I'm not going to play French horn because I heard it's difficult. Well, how do you know until you pick it up? If you love the sound of the French horn, you should play the French horn. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you love the sound of a piccolo, play the piccolo. And you'll always be heard if you're a piccolo player.
Yes.
Always be heard. So that's what I would tell people. Pick the instrument that makes the most sense to you and enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
And then do you have a personal favorite instrument? I know we've alluded, I don't think we've actually directly said it, so you are a clarinet player.
I'm a clarinetist, and I also play alto sax.
Yes.
I love playing the clarinet.
And then, so do you have a favorite instrument besides your own? And maybe it's not even a band instrument, if it's a piano, guitar, or some other things? Maybe more just to listen to than actually play?
My favorite instrument is the person who's playing in front of me, who's playing a solo and is really playing the best I've ever heard him play. I had this experience with a young lady in orchestra that last concert I conducted had some oboe solos. And she's been in the orchestra for about 3 years, and her personal growth has been amazing. She has just come such a long way. And I went up to her after the concert and I gave her a hug and I said, it's been so gratifying to see your growth as a musician, as an oboist. It's made my time here so worthwhile. So that's what I really like to see. And we did mention this just in passing about the students who play in the band. Can I touch on that for a moment?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
We've had this program with the Park Band that we're kind of unique as a group that has people who are paid to play. Mm-hmm. We also have amateur musicians from our 3 high schools. Kind of spread out within the band, a flute here, a clarinet there, an oboe, all through the band. And we have used it as an opportunity for kids who are doing real well in their high school band to play with a group that does things real quick. They're not. I always tell the kids, and I'll be meeting with them in a couple of weeks. I said, this is a band like you've never been in. You're going to come in and we're going to do a concert on the same night you rehearse. So you have to buckle your seatbelt. You have to know when to play. You have to ask questions. And sometimes you have to know that maybe I'm going to have to let these 4 measures go because I just cannot play them. Mm-hmm. But in general, the kids I've worked with in my years, you walk up, I always tell them, you'll come off after the concert season and you'll tell me, boy, I can really sight read now. Mm-hmm. And they will come up and they'll say, wow, I did 4 or 5 concerts with the Park Band. I can't believe how much better I'm sight reading. I said, it's amazing what you can do when you're forced to do it. Mm-hmm. So having those people from the high school come in and play with the professional musicians is, I think, good for our professional musicians. Mm-hmm. We always tell them, hey, you're not there to give private lessons, but help people out. And if you remind them if they missed a key signature, because those are important things. But as kids progress in the band, they find that their ability to sight read, to do things under pressure is much greater. And I think when they go back to play in their high school bands in fall, they find more comfortable because they can read faster and better than before. So that's a program we've had since before I was with the band. I think it goes back probably to the late 50s when they organized that. And we've always worked real hard to keep a good relationship, and we like the high school band directors to have involvement. Some of them have played in the band, some of them have guest conducted. So we have a real strong tie to the music program in the city of Waukesha.
That's great. Yeah, it's like a good mentorship channel, basically.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm. So kind of going off that is, can community members get involved with the Civic Band? And if so, how can they do that?
Well, there are people who have come to concerts who have stopped up and said, I'm a musician. Here's my background. I'd be interested in substituting in the band if you needed someone. Mm-hmm. We always turn those names over to Glenn Lundy, our band manager, and Glenn is the one who's responsible for staffing the band. We have a strong core of people. Let people go on vacations. Someone can get sick at the last moment. And Glenn is the one who will be on the phone finding a last-minute oboe replacement, or we need someone to fill in on percussion, or whatever the case may be. So although I have an idea who's going to be at the concert rehearsal and the concert that night, I never know till I show up.
Right.
So I work with who's there. But we have picked up people that way. I'm thinking of one of our clarinet players had come to concerts. I knew him. I went to music school with him, and he said, if you ever have an opening, let me know. I'd like to play. And eventually we had an opening, and he's now playing in the section. Another thing that people can do is absolutely attend the concerts. I mean, that's a big thing. But beyond that, we have had people who have made an effort to help support the band financially. We have a number of companies who have covered the cost of a concert or two. We've had individual people who, for one reason or another, I'm trying to think of Gene Marazzo, who was our principal chair clarinetist for decades. When Gene passed away, his family came up and said they wanted to have a concert dedicated for Gene, and they wanted to pay for it. So at the night, we have the big TV screens, and the concert was sponsored by the Marazzo family. We have one sponsor who chooses to remain anonymous, and they sponsor a concert every year. So that's also a thing they can do. But the biggest thing is coming down and enjoying the moment with the band. That's the thing that the musicians and I live for, and it's the thing that's, as my good friend says, if nobody shows up for the concert to be in the audience, all we're doing is having a second rehearsal on the stage where we're all dressed the same. So we always encourage people to show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could tell for anyone listening too, it does work. It's not like it is just, oh, you have to just be good. Like, I was a student. I came in playing a couple concerts when I was in high school, and then I did well enough and was a good enough of a musician, at least, that I was able to sub year after year. And then last year I played about half the concerts, and now this year I'll be playing on every concert. So it took me a while, but I got there, and I'm here.
Well, we're very sure in vetting our people.
Yeah. So who has been your biggest influence?
Well, that's like asking me what my favorite instrument is. But I would do a shout out to a couple of people. Number one, I had a high school band director for my last year in high school. He came in my senior year. His name is Douglas Loss. He now lives in Las Vegas. Doug was very instrumental in encouraging me to seek a career being a music teacher, to the extent that my last semester in school, he turned over directing the 7th grade band. We had a 7-12 high school, and it was kind of a beginner band, and he would sit in the back of the room and watch me, help me do a lesson plan. He would do a little bit of work, but I worked with those kids for a whole semester, which really hooked me on the idea of, gee, I think I want to do this. In college, I was very inspired by music theory teacher and composition, Dr. John Downey, who was a prince of a man, a wonderful, absolutely fantastic musician, a piano player who could play anything. And his gentle approach to teaching was never belittling, never bemoaning your failures. He was always encouraging you, was a person who greatly affected me. There were two men who were outside of my professional learning. One was Nick Contorno, who used to direct a group called the Milwaukee Elks Cadet Band. I played in that band for 1 year, and then I graduated into the Milwaukee Elks Youth Band under the direction of Mr. Wayne Becker. And both of them were really inspirational to me and remained associates and colleagues and friends my entire life. They both passed on now. But and with Wayne particularly, when I retired, I became part of a foursome that went golfing with him twice a week. So his mentorship of me also became a friendship. That was very important to me. And the last person I would mention, and I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, but I was privileged to take clarinet lessons for a while from Russell Dagan. Russell Dagan was a principal chair clarinet in the Milwaukee Symphony, and he actually lived out in Waukesha. And I took lessons from him for 2 years in college. And then afterwards, I took lessons on my own, paid for lessons with him. And he really was inspiring, because he was such an impeccable clarinet player. He'd play for me in his lessons, and I wonder, what am I doing playing this clarinet? Because he could play anything flawlessly. But he was very supportive of the fact that when I came to him and he asked me, well, what do you want to do on the clarinet? I said, I want to be a high school band director. He said, well, all right, I'll teach you to play the clarinet with the idea that you're going to be a high school band director, that you're not going to want to go on to Juilliard and try and play in a group. And he was very welcoming in that manner. And quite frankly, it was amazing. In later years, I had the opportunity to teach a couple of his kids in the band program at North High School. And actually, I gave clarinet lessons to his daughter, Kelly, which I always found interesting. I said, Russ, why am I giving your daughter clarinet lessons? Because, I know you may not know this, but you're better than I am. And he said, well, yes, I am better than you. And he said, but she'll listen to you and she won't listen to me. But that was really fun. And he remained a friend. In fact, I used to go out for a hamburger with him once in a while at Murph's over on Sunset when he was still in business. So music is the kind of place where maybe not so much in other subject areas, but it's a place where when you graduate, your mentors and your teachers come back to you in a lot of ways. And that's part of what the joy of being a musician.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And if you wanted to come out and catch any of the performances, they are Thursdays, June 19th, June 26th, July 10th, July 17th, July 24th, and July 31st of 2025, in case you're listening to this in a future year. They promptly, it seems like, start at 8 o'clock and generally don't go past 9 o'clock.
And the concert on the 31st, I should point out, is the Waukesha Area Jazz Express. So, and again, they've been doing this for a number of years, and many of their musicians are my musicians too. So it's kind of a crossover. Always a great time.
Yeah, and all those take place in the Les Paul Performance Center at Cutler Park at 321 Wisconsin, right next to the Waukesha Public Library. But thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure to be here.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Talkin' Waukesha. We hope you enjoyed diving into the heart of our city with us.
If you have a story to share or just want to say hello, reach out to us on social media at City of Waukesha on Facebook. We love hearing from our listeners.
Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review if you enjoyed the conversation. It really helps us spread the word.
As always, thanks for tuning in to Talkin' Waukesha, where every conversation springs to life.